Hello and welcome to this week's Liverpool.com podcast. I'm your host, Matt Addison. Tom Beattie is with me once again, and we're going to have a chat about Liverpool's 2-0 victory over Real Madrid earlier in the week and look ahead to Manchester City this weekend as well. The week has gone really, really well for Liverpool so far, and hopefully that can continue on Sunday at Anfield in another massive game for Arne Slot's side. Before we get stuck into that, though, to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, you can go to nordvpn.com/bloodred. Our link, of course, gives you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. The link for all of that is in the podcast episode description box below. Let's get straight into it, though, Tom. It was a fantastic European night, a really big statement from Liverpool to beat an albeit injury-stricken Real Madrid. Liverpool, of course, had injuries of their own as well, but I think the biggest thing for me was just the overwhelming sense that this is a Liverpool team that can compete in the Premier League, but it can compete in the Champions League as well. Injuries, yes, but this was still Real Madrid.
Yeah, just an incredible result, really. And I think we said on a previous show, if to beat Real Madrid, I think it would resound around Europe. And like we touched upon there, they did have a couple of injuries coming into the game, but that prestige of Madrid doesn't go away. And I think that, I think Liverpool kind of owed them one a little bit. I think it was 8 games since the last time Liverpool beat them back in, I think, 2009. And yeah, I think since then, it's kind of, it's been a rough ride, I think, for Liverpool. And it felt a little bit, kind of looking at the interviews with the players after the game, that, they kind of felt they owed Madrid one a little bit. Particularly Andy Robertson kind of made reference to that, didn't he? And yeah, it feels like a massive marker for me in Arne Slot's tenure. There's obviously been that debate over whether Liverpool have played kind of one of the big boys. Well, you can't get any bigger than the Champions League holders and La Liga holders like they were able to do this week. So, yeah, you can only beat what's in front of you. And I think, that's probably the toughest test, I think, that you can have, probably other than Manchester City, I think, in Europe. So, it's a massive statement, I think, and kind of a landmark victory, really, for the new manager as well.
Yeah, and I mean, it wasn't just the case that Liverpool kind of defended, dug deep, as we've seen, in the past couple of decades. They've done that plenty of times in Europe. They've done it against, big teams like Real Madrid. But I think Liverpool were deserved winners. I don't think anybody can really doubt that. It was, fairly even in that first half. But then second half, they just turned it up another gear. Kelleher makes the penalty save. I thought Andy Robertson was a little bit unlucky, really, to give away a penalty for very, very minimal contact. But I think it was more a sense of, Liverpool showing that they belong at that level. We do have to reference the fact that Real Madrid were missing some players, but they still had Kylian Mbappe on the wing. They still had Jude Bellingham, Luka Modric. They've still got a lot of quality really within that team. And I can't really remember too many chances that Real Madrid had. It was almost a bit of a test really of, okay, Liverpool have controlled games against lesser teams in the Premier League, but how can they control a game against, a team like Real Madrid? But so far, the way that Slot set his team up has worked against lesser teams. It almost worked better against Real Madrid than it did against Southampton at certain points. Obviously, that was more a performance thing than a tactical thing. But to play like that and to put in a performance like that against Real Madrid, I almost think if you can do it against Real Madrid, then it's proof that it almost works against anybody, really.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of couldn't believe what I was seeing, really. It was incredible to see, you're coming up against, the European champions and you kind of, you're controlling the game, really. I felt second half, Liverpool particularly were dominant in the game. And, I didn't really feel that Madrid had much of a sniff, really. You mentioned about the lack of chances that they created. And yeah, like you say, I think first half it was probably evenly matched, but I think possibly after the Conor Bradley challenge, I think a lot's been made of that, and quite rightly. It takes something for the atmosphere to kind of brew at Anfield sometimes, and I think that that really got the crowd going. And I think after then it was kind of advantage with Liverpool, and I think we saw that second half the wind kind of seemed to be in Liverpool's sails, and yeah, it just seemed like such a statement victory last night, and it just kind of the way Liverpool dominated the game and them kind of little battles within the game as well. I thought were fascinating. Conor Bradley I mentioned there, up against Kylian Mbappe, and, we know how good he is, but I thought on the night that he dealt with him really well. And again, he didn't really have many chances to speak of, to be honest. And, players like Jude Bellingham as well, we know what a threat they are. And, it almost looked like Ancelotti after the first Liverpool goal. He did obviously tinker with it. He brought a couple of players on, and I think they looked a little bit kind of shaken after that goal, and they were kind of trying to make it up as they went along in terms of sort of the tactical setup. And it just seemed like nothing really clicked for Madrid, I felt, in the game itself. And, I think everything kind of clicked for Liverpool. And it was one of those nights, I think, at Anfield where the crowd got up and you kind of sensed after the first goal that, possibly it was going to be one of them nights at Anfield. So, yeah, I think obviously the penalty save as well, that felt like a goal in the ground. And the cheer that went up. And, it's moments like that, I think, that will be remembered forever, I think, among the Liverpool fans. The performance of Conor Bradley at right back, and obviously the performance of the keeper. The two centre-backs I thought were incredible on the night. Alexis McAllister as well in the midfield, I thought, really put in a good account of himself, and obviously got his goal. And Ryan Gravenberch as well, kind of pulling the strings up against, players like Luka Modric. And, obviously it was a little bit makeshift for Madrid in terms of their lineup, wasn't it? I think Arda Güler started the game, and they had Valverde at right back, but they're still top quality players. And I think to control a game like that, like I said, I couldn't really believe what I was seeing, but that kind of shows the quality of this Liverpool team. And, if you can mix it up against a team of that stature, I think, like you said before, you can possibly do it against anyone.
I thought Conor Bradley was the man in the match, really. He was the highest in our player ratings, gave him a 9 out of 10. Maybe that was even slightly harsh given what he did against who he did it against. But I was so impressed with him, really. You mentioned the tackle on Mbappe. I thought he was very good before that as well. Obviously, after that, the crowd is up and his confidence is up as well. A few minutes before Liverpool scored, he had that header where, that was the only thing that could have made the night better, really, was if he had found the back of the net with that. That would have been, a fantastic moment for him. But it reminded me a little bit of when he played against Chelsea last season, and that was a bit of a breakout performance. Obviously, this is a slightly different stage, a different team that he was up against. But I'm sure, teams around Europe must be having a look at him. Obviously, I'm sure you'll agree with me that we hope that Trent Alexander-Arnold signs a new contract at Liverpool and stays well beyond 2025. But I do wonder with, Conor Bradley, if Trent does sign that extension and stay for the next few years, it almost feels a bit like a Kelleher situation where he might be happy for a short period of time, but, he's so good and he could clearly play right now for most teams in Europe. He's just a really, really impressive player. And obviously Liverpool have got to have two good players in every position. They've got to have that squad depth with so many matches. But yeah, he's only, I think, started 2 games in the Carabao Cup, and then obviously the last 2 when Trent's been injured. It almost doesn't seem fair to him when he's performing that well. I suppose it's a possible conundrum if Liverpool can get Trent to sign that new contract, which we hope is the case. I think that could potentially be a conversation for the next couple of years, potentially.
Yeah, you feel for him, don't you? Because like a performance like that up against Real Madrid, and he's never really let Liverpool down. He always seems to grow, I think, in games and grow in stature. He's obviously he's a tough opponent, I think, to come up against. He's always got that steeliness in his game, and he showed that fearlessness, I think, last night. The tackle on Mbappe. I think. It can't be overlooked, can it, in terms of sort of a marker within the game. I felt that, it's kind of the oldest saying in the book, isn't it, that you've got to put your marker down early in them games. And, it took until the half an hour mark for that to happen. But I think it was a key moment in that game. And yeah, like you say, it's kind of similar to the Kelleher situation that, he's that good that he could possibly, play for another leading European side, and that's kind of the problem he's got, I think, now. That there will be people, I think, sniff around him if he did become available. And obviously with Trent being there, you presume he'd be the number one choice if he was to sign a new contract as well. So yeah, it's a bit of an odd situation, isn't it? And just touching on the goalkeeper as well, I mean, what a performance that was as well. It just, I think that will go down in Liverpool history. I think he'll get remembered for that alongside the cup finals as well. And, you've got players there where, they've not played that many games, relatively speaking, for the club. But, there's a long line now, I think, of games that they've been involved in that will get remembered, and, quite rightly as well. So, yeah, it's a bit of a strange situation, I think, where you've got players where they kind of walk into some of the leading teams in Europe at the moment. So, yeah, I've got sympathy for them, basically, in terms of, not getting the minutes across the season. And, it's one of them. It's a bit of an odd situation, I think, for kind of the recruitment chiefs at Liverpool and the manager as well. But yeah, at the moment, it's a good problem to have, I think, sort of having that many options in every position.
Yeah, and of course, it's only a problem if Trent signs the new contract. I think there's definitely an argument that if he doesn't, maybe Conor Bradley is, ready to step up and go into those shoes. I think, we've seen it enough times against enough big teams now that obviously Liverpool will have to buy someone because they can't just have one. But I think he is at that level now, ready to take that next step and really kick on. But talking of players that have kicked on and taken the next step this season, obviously Ryan Gravenberch, you mentioned him before. I think we've got to speak about him again because it was another really good performance. Jude Bellingham didn't really do a great deal for Real Madrid, and I think that was largely thanks to Gravenberch always being near him. There was a couple of times in that first half where he spun away from him and maybe just got the timing a little bit wrong, but it was just another performance where you think Liverpool have really sold that number 6 position. What did you make of Gravenberch, and how impressive is it that he managed to do that against Real Madrid?
I mean, it almost feels like a coming of age kind of game for him. Obviously, he's been excellent so far this season. I think arguably Liverpool's best player overall. And again, it's going to be one of them games, I think, that sticks in the memory. So I felt like it was a big moment for him, particularly coming up against players of that stature. Luka Modric, for example, he's kind of the master in that position, isn't he? And he had a lot of the ball. He had a lot of the possession, I think, at points in that first half. And I felt it was kind of 50-50 in terms of, two teams kind of going at it, kind of hammer and tongs, really, in terms of, the possession battle and that sort of thing. I felt second half that Gravenberch kind of getting on the ball a bit more and sort of focusing on that side of his game. I think that's possibly the standout attribute of his game, the passing range that he's got and being able to kind of move the team through the transitions and that kind of thing. And like you say, I think he's really solidified his status in the squad over the course of this season. And this game was kind of the one where it was kind of the cherry on top, really. It was a great performance from him. And yeah, he was pulling the strings second half, I felt. And to do that up against a team like Madrid with the players, I just thought it was really impressive. And, I was looking at kind of the midfield that Madrid have got last night. Camavinga, Bellingham had to drop deep in the first half before he got moved into more of an attacking role. But, I felt at times they were kind of out of the game. Some of them players, they were struggling to actually get into the game. And, Luka Modric, I felt, possibly he was their most dominant player, I felt, in midfield. So, yeah, it just kind of shows how well Gravenberch did, I think, particularly second half. He was able to stem that. And I think he was a big reason that Liverpool were able to kind of get control in the game as well. And yeah, that was kind of the story of the second half. I felt that Liverpool dominated the game. And like I say, I think he was a big part of that.
Yeah, it wasn't just him as well. Obviously, McAllister scores. I think that was probably his best game for a while. Curtis Jones was excellent as well. And I thought it was really interesting that Liverpool seemed to press with a bit more intensity and a bit more sort of in numbers at times. They had sort of 4 or 5 players, inside the Real Madrid penalty area at times when they were pressing the players and trying to force those mistakes. It's not something we've always seen from Liverpool this season. They've maybe been a little bit less intense in terms of that side of the game, maybe compared to last season. But it felt like it was a deliberate decision in some ways, but it was probably also the crowd being up, the fact that it was, a big European night. Real Madrid with a couple of injuries, a young player at centre half who maybe not that they would target him, but maybe you could put him under a little bit of pressure. To be fair, I thought he did really, really well for them. But it was interesting. I think that midfield was a lot more, pressing heavy, even without Dominic Szoboszlai, because he's the one that you think is the most suited to that kind of thing. But I've got to ask you about McAllister and Curtis Jones as well, because I thought they were both superb as well.
Yeah, they're incredible. And what I kind of like about the pair of them is that I think it goes under the radar a little bit, but there's a bit of needle to their play, I think, particularly off the ball. And I think that's needed in games like that. You're coming up against a team where, they've been around the block. Obviously, they've kind of dominated the European scene, haven't they? Sort of, the past decade, really, in terms of the amount of trophies they've been able to win in the competition. And I think that, they didn't show any fear, I felt, last night. And I was particularly impressed, first of all, Curtis Jones, he showed, I think, last night that he belongs on that stage. And, to see an academy lad come through, it's the same with Conor Bradley and Kelleher as well. To see them come through and, be more than holding their own against the European champions. I thought that was just amazing to see. And yeah, I thought Curtis, again, the great thing with him is that he can get you out of tight spaces and keep hold of the ball, particularly periods in the game where you haven't had much of the possession, or you feel that Madrid are kind of, waiting to pounce a little bit. He's the kind of player who can get you out of them tight spaces, and he showed that a lot last night, I felt. I thought it was a great performance from him. And then I think McAllister, it was almost like a captain's performance. I felt in midfield, to get that goal. I felt when, I felt up until the penalty miss from Madrid that it was kind of a 50-50 game. I really did. Just looking back on the games Liverpool have had against Madrid in recent times, I go back to the Paris final. I think the story of that night really was that Liverpool had a lot of the ball and, the lion's share of the chances, really. And it took for a couple of opportunities, really, for Madrid to pounce. And I was a little bit wary last night that was kind of gonna be the story again. Madrid would kind of invite the pressure a little bit, invite the chances, and then they get one opportunity through Mbappe or even Hendrick off the bench, and that'd be the game. But yeah, I think just having a player like McAllister where they're able to step up in them big moments. Obviously, he's played in the World Cup, being through that experience, and I think that it's that experience, I think, that kind of shone through last night. And I think, there's an argument alongside Bradley that he was possibly man of the match. Again, he's a player who he set the tone, I think, in terms of just the commitment you've got to show. That bit of gnarliness sometimes, I think, in the midfield. Again, it goes under the radar with him sometimes, but I think it's definitely there. And I think just overall as a performance, I think, I said it at the top of the show, a couple of other players, I think it'll be talked about in years to come. I think just as an overall performance, I think people, will look back when the dust settles and say he was a big part in that victory.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the kind of the gnarliness and the physical side of the game. I thought Curtis Jones was very good at that as well. We know that he can have that side to his game, but I can remember one moment when Kylian Mbappe passed the ball and he just gave him a little shove just to let him know that he was there. And you don't always see that from Curtis Jones, but I thought that was it probably showed his confidence, I think, to do that against Mbappe when Liverpool were on top, just to give him that little bit of a nudge and a little bit of a reminder. But talking about the midfield, we'll move on to speak about Manchester City. Obviously, at this weekend, it's going to be another difficult game. Virgil van Dijk has been previewing it and told us, reporters last night at Anfield, that, obviously City are not in a great moment, similar to Real Madrid. They've got lots of injuries, but they can turn it on. And at some point, you do feel like, Manchester City are going to turn and flip the switch and suddenly look a lot better than what they have done. The hope is, of course, that it's not this weekend. So in terms of that midfield, I wonder whether Dominic Szoboszlai was taken out midweek because he's going to come back in on Sunday. But just looking at how well each of those players we've just gone through, Gravenberch, Jones and McAllister, would you change it up at all? Would you bring Dominic Szoboszlai back in? Or are you happy with what we saw on Wednesday, and would you make those three go again?
I was saying after the game, kind of coming out the ground, it's very difficult, obviously, to kind of change that team. because it's got that forward momentum now, and you've just beaten arguably the biggest club in Europe, and it's such a marker of a victory. But I think the manager, he has showed at times decisions where there's no sentimentality involved, and I think that like you say there, that I felt that possibly Dominic Szoboszlai, I think, will come back in just in terms of the legs that he gives Liverpool, and obviously there's been sort of a hard run of fixtures in a sense, hasn't it, after the international break, that the Southampton game, well, it's out to the play. Certainly the Madrid game as well, just in terms of the mental toughness of a game like that. So yeah, I would expect, I think, Szoboszlai to come back in. And I think the problem for City in recent weeks, obviously they've lost 5 on the spin, and then obviously the draw against Feyenoord must have kind of felt like a loss as well. So they're in a real negative moment right now, and I think in midfield they've really struggled in that time. I think they've been overrun a few times, particularly the Feyenoord game. I think late on in that game, they had again the lion's share of the possession, and they just kind of seemed to lose the grip on the game, I felt, on the night. So it's a bit of an odd one where you're coming up against a team when you expect with Man City, it's going to be a tough game anyway. I think they will raise the game. But yeah, that problem in midfield at the moment, they just seem a little bit jaded. The energy is possibly not there. And to be able to bring a player in like Szoboszlai, where he's going to be that bit more fresh, I think that could be a massive positive, I think, for Liverpool.
You mentioned there how open they are in midfield, and it's really, really baffling at the moment. I don't quite know what explanation you can put on it, really, for Manchester City's downfall over the last few weeks. I went to Rotterdam a few weeks ago and watched final play, and they got beat at home by Red Bull Salzburg, who've not had a particularly good start. They really did not look, a team capable of going to the Etihad and scoring 3 goals. And I just think it's a really strange situation to be able to try and put your finger on exactly what it is. But at the same time, I feel like if Manchester City are shipping goals to teams that overrun them in midfield, that surely has to suit what Liverpool are all about. Whether it's Szoboszlai or Jones, whether it's McAllister and Gravenberch, who can maybe break forward from a little bit deeper. Everything in this game, without sort of coming into it too overconfidently, from what we've seen in the last few weeks, everything about this game, where Liverpool are strong, Manchester City seem weak. It feels like a massive, massive opportunity, really, to me, for Liverpool to put down another marker, obviously, potentially go 11 points ahead of Manchester City. It's a game where there's probably more pressure on Manchester City in some ways, but it would also feel like a missed opportunity if Liverpool didn't beat them, I think, just because of how they're playing at the moment. So where are you at in terms of confidence for Sunday? I'm sure there'll be a few pre-match nerves on the day, but as we speak right now, are you sort of going into it with full confidence that Liverpool can do the business?
I think obviously they've had glaring issues, haven't they, coming into the game. So it's 6 games, I think, now where they've really struggled back to back. And like to say there, I think, Liverpool are strong at the moment. Man City, they seem to be weak. And, that I do expect, I think, Pep to kind of turn up and have something up his sleeve. He always does. And even, I think, when Man City have been riding high, he has kind of sat in at Anfield a couple of times now. He's been happy to take a point. And, I was saying to a couple of people before that, I kind of feel a little bit like he might be okay to kind of take a point at Anfield. Obviously, a margin of 8 points, it's not ideal, but Liverpool have still got to go to the Etihad. If they're able to beat Liverpool there, it'd be down to 5 points. And kind of the runs they've been able to go on in recent years, I think it would suggest, I think, that possibly they'd be able to kind of claw away at that deficit at that point. But I think it's a massive game, on both sides. Like you say, it's that chance to put down a massive marker. Obviously, we'll only be kind of 13 games into the season by the end of the game there on Sunday. But I just think, 11 points for any team, it's a massive margin. And I think the way that Liverpool seems to be set up at the moment, there doesn't seem to be that aspect to Liverpool where there's any kind of inconsistency in terms of performances. It seems very measured. It seems very you wouldn't expect them to be shipping goals with this current back four. Obviously, we don't know kind of whether there's going to be injuries along the way and that sort of thing. But I think, the old saying obviously is that, defenses win titles ultimately. And Liverpool at the moment, they've got probably the best defensive record in Europe. And yeah, it just seems to be a perfect storm really for Liverpool to possibly take advantage of the situation there. It felt a little bit like that coming into the Arsenal game. There was a little kind of gap between the two clubs there, and there was a couple of injuries for Arsenal as well, and suspensions as well to the key players. But this feels even bigger because we know how good Man City are. We know they're capable of going on runs. I kind of expect in January, possibly they might make a signing or two. We don't know, but it doesn't seem out of the question that they would and possibly strengthen, even though they've got the problems that they have. So I still think there's a lot to happen in this season, but to kind of, at the start of December, have a potentially, 11-point advantage over Man City, it would have been unthinkable, I think, coming into the season. And I think it's just a massive opportunity for Liverpool. I think it's possibly, if they were to lose, in terms of Man City, if they were to lose, I think it'd be very difficult, just from a neutral point of view, to claw that back, given sort of the record Liverpool have so far this season. So yeah, it's a massive game, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, I mean, for City, they'll obviously look at it and think that they maybe have to win to a certain extent. As you say, a draw wouldn't be the end of the world for them, because we know that they can put together those runs. But I'm not sure there's anybody really seriously thinking that City are going to put on that run. I don't think even City themselves at the moment can think about winning 18 games on the spin, just as Pep Guardiola, I think, said after the final game, or possibly in the pre-match presser. I can't remember which one it was now, but he basically said, he was asked about that, and he said, well, it'd be nice just to win one game for now, let alone, putting together a string of results. So I think, yeah, it's definitely a moment where Liverpool can put down another marker, and you wouldn't be surprised, really. I think if that's the bottom line, if Liverpool did go into that game and win and find a way, and it might be an even first half as it was against Real Madrid, and it has been in quite a few games this season, but they just turn up that heat in the second half, it wouldn't massively surprise me. But just before we finish, I don't normally do this, but it is a big game, so we'll go for a score prediction for the weekend, and how you think the game might go. I'll let you go first, and then I'll give mine afterwards.
I actually think, in my heart of hearts, that I think it'll be a draw. I'm gonna go 1-1. I think that Pep will turn up and try and take a point. He's done that when City have been on top in title races. I think Anfield's a big factor, and I think he'll want to quieten the ground first of all. And if that means that he's got to sit behind the ball, I think he'll do it, just to kind of get out of Anfield without losing. I think that might make it difficult for Liverpool. I think in terms of, maybe getting that advantage in terms of, the attacking side of the game. So yeah, I might be wrong, but I think it might be a draw on Sunday.
Okay, I'm going to go for a Liverpool win. I'm going to go for 3-1. I think City will score, but I'm going to go bold and say that Liverpool will outgun them, possibly in the second half. I think it will be a pretty tight game to start with, but I'd back Liverpool to go on and do that. And I think my other prediction for the game is that Luis Diaz will start through the middle and maybe have a Gakpo, Diaz and Salah front line, which is probably what I would have done, I think, for the Real Madrid game. But having not done that, I think possibly that might be one to look out for the weekend. But we shall leave it there for this week. We'll be back next week, of course, with the Liverpool.com podcast. I'm sure whatever the score is on Sunday, we will be discussing that in some form or another couple of big games as well to come, with Newcastle and Everton next week as well. For now, though, all of the focus is on Manchester City, and we'll catch you again at the same time next week.